They say blood doesn't lie. But for 15 years, one woman made it tell a $9 billion lie. She had no degree, she had no working science, but she had a black turtleneck, a fake deep voice, and a terrifying ability to make smart people stupid. Her name was Elizabeth Holmes. She fooled the US government, she fooled the military, she fooled the founders of Oracle and Walmart. She built a unicorn on a foundation of pure delusion. But this wasn't just a financial scam like Bernie Madoff. This was a medical nightmare. Real cancer patients were told they were healthy. Real healthy people were told they were dying. All so Elizabeth could keep playing dress-up as Steve Jobs. How did a 19-year-old dropout trick the world's most powerful men into giving her their money, their reputation, and their blind loyalty? And how did it all unravel with a single email? This is the insane true story of the blood that never was. Elizabeth Holmes didn't want to be rich. She wanted to be a god. Even as a child, she told her relatives, "I want to be a billionaire, not to buy toys, but to buy immortality." She idolized inventors like Thomas Edison and Steve Jobs. She got into Stanford, the heart of Silicon Valley. But the classroom was too slow for her. She didn't want to learn the rules, she wanted to break them. In her sophomore year, she pitched an idea to her professor, a wearable patch that would scan blood. PhD students told her it was physically impossible. You can't fit that much engineering into a patch. But Elizabeth had a superpower, the reality distortion field. She ignored the laws of physics and dropped out to start Theranos. The premise was simple. One drop of blood from a finger prick, put it in a box called the Edison, and get 200 test results instantly. It was the iPod of healthcare. There was just one problem: physics. When you prick a finger, the blood cells explode. The sample is dirty. You can't run precise tests on exploded cells. But Elizabeth didn't care. She told her engineers, "Make it work or get out." So they faked it. They built a prototype that looked beautiful on the outside. But inside? It was a robotic arm glued to a pipette that spilled blood everywhere. It was a biohazard nightmare disguised as a tech product. But she needed money, so she targeted old, powerful men. Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, General James Mattis. These men knew war, but they didn't know software. They saw a confident young woman and saw the future. How did she show them the machine if it didn't work? The fake demo. She would prick their fingers, put the blood in the machine, and while they drank coffee, technicians in the back room ran the tests by hand. The investors saw the results pop up on the screen and believed it was magic. The money poured in. Theranos raised hundreds of millions of dollars. The valuation hit $9 billion. Elizabeth was on top of the world. She hired security guards. She started flying private. She adopted the black turtleneck uniform permanently. She deepened her voice to sound more authoritative. She wasn't just a CEO, she was a cult leader. But running a scam in a lab is one thing, putting it in the real world is another. In 2013, she signed a deal with Walgreens. She wanted to put these broken machines in stores across America. This was the point of no return. Real patients came in, they got the finger prick, and the machine failed. So Elizabeth and her secret boyfriend and COO, Sunny Balwani, set up a secret lab called Jurassic Park. They secretly bought standard Siemens blood analyzers, machines that actually worked, and hacked them. They diluted the tiny finger prick samples to run on these big machines. It was like watering down wine. The results were useless. Patients were told they had HIV when they didn't. Pregnant women were told they were miscarrying when their babies were fine. The company was gaslighting people about their own biology. Inside the company, the culture was toxic. Sunny Balwani ran the place like a prison. They monitored emails, they tracked employees' movements. Anyone who asked questions was fired immediately. This brings us to the tragedy of Ian Gibbons. Ian was the chief scientist. He was a brilliant British chemist who knew the technology was a lie. He tried to tell Elizabeth, but she isolated him. In 2013, Ian was subpoenaed for a lawsuit. He was trapped. If he told the truth, he'd destroy the company. If he lied, he'd commit perjury. The pressure was too much. Tragically, Ian took his own life. When Elizabeth heard the news, she didn't send flowers. She didn't mourn. She simply told her office to get Ian's laptop back immediately. It was cold. It was inhuman. It was business. After Ian's death, the paranoia increased. But you can't silence everyone forever. Enter Tyler Schultz. He was 22, fresh out of Stanford, and the grandson of board member George Schultz. Tyler saw the fraud in the lab. He saw the quality control checks failing. He went to Elizabeth to complain. Her response? She dismissed him. She thought she could control him because of his grandfather. But Tyler had a conscience. He tried to tell his grandfather, George Schultz, but George refused to believe him. He trusted the 20-something dropout over his own flesh and blood. Tyler was crushed. So, Tyler went nuclear. He contacted the New York state regulators anonymously, and then he did something even more dangerous. He started talking to a reporter named John Carreyrou. John Carreyrou was an investigative legend at the Wall Street Journal. He started digging. He interviewed ex-employees. He interviewed doctors. He realized this wasn't just a bad product, it was a criminal enterprise. Elizabeth found out about the investigation. She unleashed her lawyers. They stalked Tyler Schultz. They followed him. They threatened to bankrupt his family. They ambushed him at his grandfather's house. She even went to Rupert Murdoch, who owned the Wall Street Journal and had invested $125 million in Theranos. She asked him to kill the story. Amazingly, Murdoch refused. He let the presses roll. October 15, 2015, the day the music died. The article was published. Hot startup Theranos has struggled with its blood test technology. The world gasped. The emperor had no clothes. Elizabeth went on damage control. She appeared on Mad Money and delivered her famous line, "First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, then you change the world." She was in complete denial. But the FDA wasn't watching TV. They raided the labs. They found the illegal nanotainers. They found the inaccurate tests. They immediately banned Theranos from using the Edison device. The game was over. The collapse was swift. Walgreens kicked them out and sued for $140 million. Investors sued for fraud. Forbes revised Elizabeth's net worth from $4.5 billion to zero. In 2018, the company dissolved. But Elizabeth and Sonny weren't just broke. They were indicted on federal fraud charges. They were facing decades in prison. But Elizabeth had one last trick up her sleeve. She got pregnant. And then she got pregnant again. The trial was delayed. People wondered, was this a strategy to gain sympathy from the jury? The trial finally began in 2021. Elizabeth took the stand, and her defense was shocking. She didn't deny the fraud. Instead, she blamed Sonny. She claimed Sonny manipulated her, controlled her food, and twisted her mind. It was the Svengali defense. She tried to paint herself as a naive victim of an abusive boyfriend. But the prosecution had receipts. Text messages showed Elizabeth was fully in charge. She was micromanaging the brand, the lies, and the retaliation. She wasn't a puppet. She was the puppeteer. And then there was the voice. Witnesses testified that Elizabeth's famous baritone was fake. Sometimes when she was drunk or excited, she slipped into a high-pitched voice. The deep voice, the unblinking stare, the black turtleneck, it was all a costume. She had created a fictional character to play the role of a CEO. But the jury saw through the mask. On January 3, 2022, the verdict was read. Guilty on 4 counts of fraud. The judge wasn't swayed by her tears. He sentenced her to 11 years in prison. Sunny Balwani was tried separately. He got nearly 13 years. The dynamic duo of Silicon Valley was reunited in the federal penitentiary system. Today, Elizabeth Holmes is serving her time at a minimum security camp in Texas. The $9 billion is gone, the revolutionary technology is trash, and the legacy of Theranos is a warning. Silicon Valley loves the phrase, "fake it till you make it." But there is a line. Faking a demo isn't hustle, it's a crime. And when you mess with people's health, you don't just lose money, you lose your freedom. Elizabeth fooled billionaires with a fake box, but our next scammer didn't fool anybody. He just printed his own money and bought a country. Click here to see the story of how one security guard rigged McDonald's for 12 years.